Ladies and gentlemen, when God says, "This is your hour," it is not a poetic flourish, nor a hopeful encouragement dressed in religious language. It is a pronouncement, a decisive statement from eternity spoken into the corridors of your life. It is a call from the eternal to the temporal, from the Creator to the created, from the author of time to the soul entangled in it. The notion that now, this very hour, is yours is not simply motivational, it is theological. It means that time itself has been shaped, selected, and anointed for your emergence. The delay, the waiting, the seemingly barren seasons were not wasted. They were preparation. You were not being overlooked. You were being developed. You see, we often believe that our hour will come once the circumstances around us improve, once people see us, once doors open, once we are more healed, more ready, more perfect. But divine timing is not reactive. It does not wait on human confirmation or earthly signals. God's timing is a summons that pulls us forward before we feel qualified. If you wait until you feel ready, you will miss it. Readiness, in the divine sense, is less about your comfort and more about your alignment. Your discomfort, in fact, may be the very sign that the hour is here. The seed breaks before it blooms. The hour of growth is rarely pleasant, but it is always necessary. This is your hour, not because the world says so, but because heaven has whispered it in the deep places of your soul. You may have sensed it already, an agitation that something old is dying, a hunger for something more, a frustration with the familiar. These are not mood swings. They are contractions of destiny. Just as a child cannot stay in the womb beyond its time, your soul cannot remain in hiding once your hour has come. Delay past a divine moment begins to distort. When God says open, staying closed becomes disobedience disguised as caution. We must also confront the illusion that divine timing is vague. No, it is precise. We may not grasp the full pattern in the moment, but the architecture of divine timing is meticulous. And when God says this is your hour, He is not guessing. He is not hoping you'll catch up or hoping it will work out. He is speaking from a place of absolute clarity. The hour has been prepared for you, and you have been prepared for the hour. And yet, many hear the call and remain unmoved, not because they are unwilling, but because they are confused. Why now? They ask. Why me? But perhaps a better question would be, who am I to argue with the one who knows the end from the beginning? If the one who sees all things declares this your time, what higher court are you appealing to when you resist? Who has greater wisdom than the one who knit you together, who numbered your days, who sees all timelines converging in perfect harmony? To embrace the hour is to embrace a kind of holy pressure. There will be tension. The hour does not arrive gently. It crashes into our lives, often wrapped in disruption, pain, or sudden clarity. But understand, the pain is not a punishment. It is the sound of your shell cracking. The shell that once protected you has become too small. This is your hour because the conditions that once preserved you now constrain you. You have outgrown the previous season. The tragic mistake we make is to see divine timing as a window we must wait to open. But this is not a waiting room. This is a birthing room. The hour has come because the purpose in you has matured. The fruit is ripened. The time of gestation has passed, and God, in His sovereignty, is commanding the door to open, not so you can merely see outside, but so you can step out. It is a sobering truth that hours can pass us by if we do not respond. The world is full of people who are called but never moved, summoned but never surrendered. It is not talent, nor intellect, nor even passion that distinguishes those who rise in their hour. It is obedience. Raw, trembling, immediate obedience, to stand up when everything in you says wait, to walk forward when you still feel unsure, to open, even when you do not yet know what lies on the other side of the door. So I leave you with this. Time may measure hours with numbers, but heaven measures them with courage. This is your hour. It is not next week. It is not after more healing or approval or perfection. It is now. Do not ask the hour to wait. It has already waited for you. When God commands you to open now, He is not making a gentle suggestion for your consideration. He is not nudging you toward an optional spiritual exercise. He is issuing a direct order from the seat of all authority, a summons that demands a response. And here is the striking paradox. The command to open is, in essence, a call to courageous surrender. It's a strange pairing, isn't it? Courage and surrender. We're used to thinking of them as opposites. In one we stand tall, in the other we bow. But in the kingdom of God, the deepest acts of bravery often come disguised as yielding. To open is not merely to do something. It is to become something. It is the radical act of exposing the soul to the winds of divine purpose, not because we feel invincible, but because we trust the voice that calls us. Many of us have closed ourselves without realizing it. We shut down gradually, layer by layer. After heartbreak, betrayal, failure, we learn to retreat inward, to live behind locked emotional doors. To be closed feels safe, predictable, manageable. And yet, in the moment when God says open now, we are confronted with a tension we cannot ignore. The life we've built to protect ourselves is the same life that now imprisons us. The soul cannot be both guarded and open. There comes a point when caution, though born of wisdom, becomes a form of control. And control, though it masquerades as strength, is often fear in disguise. We grip tightly to our defenses, believing we're preserving ourselves, when in fact we're preventing ourselves from becoming. God, in His mercy, does not simply ask us to grow. He commands it, not because He delights in our discomfort, but because He knows that the version of us we cling to cannot carry the weight of the purpose He's entrusted us with. So, what does it mean to open when God says so? It means coming out of hiding. It means stepping beyond the emotional barricades and allowing ourselves to be seen, not just by others, but by ourselves. It means telling the truth we've avoided, answering the call we've silenced, and becoming available for a mission that may scare us. It's letting go of the version of life we've curated and submitting to the one heaven designed. It is not comfort that defines your destiny, it is obedience. Here's where the psychological depth comes in. The resistance you feel to this command is not always rebellion, it's often grief. You are grieving the version of you that can no longer go forward. You're saying goodbye to who you were in order to step into who you were always meant to be. And grief, when unacknowledged, hardens into resistance. We say no to God not because we hate the future, but because we've made an identity out of the past. And that is the painful irony. We stay closed, not because we doubt God's power, but because we fear becoming someone we no longer recognize. But remember this, when God commands you to open, He is not asking you to open without first giving you what you need to do so. The command itself is accompanied by power. It may feel like you're being asked to leap, but in truth, you're being reminded that the wings are already there. You don't have to manufacture bravery. You only have to move in agreement with it. This is not about pretending to be fearless. God is not impressed by our false confidence. What He asks for is alignment, that the posture of your heart lines up with the reality of His call. It is possible to be terrified and obedient at the same time. In fact, that may be the most honest kind of obedience there is. Faith does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "Yes, Lord," through trembling lips, and if you wait until fear leaves, you will never open. Fear rarely exits before the act of courage. It is often cast out by it. The command to open is not about waiting for conditions to be perfect. It is about yielding to the one who is perfect. And when you do, the miracle begins. The moment you obey, heaven moves. What was locked begins to loosen. What was stagnant begins to flow. You are not being asked to open in vain. There is something waiting on the other side. Something holy, something alive, something that cannot be born until you say yes. So let me leave you with this. You do not need to feel ready to obey. You only need to trust the one who calls. The command to open may terrify the closed parts of you, but it will set free the real you. And that is the point. You are not being summoned to stay safe. You are being summoned to become whole. There comes a moment, quiet but seismic, when God does not merely suggest transformation, but commands it. A moment when he says, "Open now," not as encouragement, but as an authoritative disruption. But many of us, even while nodding in agreement, remain unmoved. Why? Because we are still bound by something deeper than circumstance. We are still in quiet agreement with powerlessness. Powerlessness isn't always obvious. It often disguises itself as humility, caution, even wisdom. We say things like, "I'm just being realistic," or "maybe it's not my time," or "I'm waiting on a sign," not realizing that we've surrendered our agency to internal scripts written by old pain. These silent agreements are not made in loud declarations. They are etched subtly through experience. Each disappointment, each rejection, each failed attempt convincing us to lower our expectations and shrink our reach. We internalize limitations and call it maturity. We spiritualize passivity and call it waiting on God. But God is not calling you to delay. He is calling you to break the contract you made with defeat. What is most insidious about these inner agreements is that they don't just paralyze you, they shape you. Over time, the soul begins to mold itself around the belief that it is helpless, that it can't change, that it isn't meant for more. And once you believe this deeply enough, you don't even need external opposition. You'll reject yourself on behalf of others before they get the chance. You'll close the door on opportunities with the justification that "I wouldn't have been ready anyway." It becomes self-sabotage masquerading as discernment. But when God says, "This is your hour," he is also saying, "Tear up every lie that told you you weren't enough." This isn't just about stepping forward. It's about renouncing the inner narratives that kept you sitting down. You cannot enter a divine moment carrying the identity you built in captivity. The victim within you must die for the warrior to rise. The one who survived must now give way to the one who will lead. This is not to belittle your pain or deny the real struggles you've endured. It is to say that your history, while it shaped you, is not allowed to define you. The voice of powerlessness will echo things like, "You always mess this up," or "Nothing ever works out for you," or "You're just not that person." And perhaps you've listened to it for so long that it sounds like reason, but let me tell you plainly, reason that denies the word of God is not wisdom. It is fear dressed up in logic. The enemy of your soul doesn't need to defeat you directly. He only needs to convince you to agree with your own unworthiness. Once that's done, you'll do all the work yourself. You'll play small. You'll silence your voice. You'll stay behind the curtain even when the spotlight is yours, but when God says, "Open now," he is confronting that agreement head on. He is saying, "I didn't put my spirit in you so you could negotiate your value. I put it in you so you could rise, and rising requires rupture. It means something in you must break, not your hope, but your allegiance to weakness. That familiar voice that says, 'Stay quiet, stay still, stay safe,' that voice must be confronted, not gently, not politely, with urgency, with truth, because that voice is not yours. It may sound like you, it may echo your past, but it is not of God, and this hour, the one you're being summoned into, has no room for voices that contradict your divine identity. There is something revolutionary about the moment. A person refuses to be small any longer. It's not arrogance, it's not pride, it is clarity. It is a return to the truth that you were made in the image of the one who spoke galaxies into existence, not to live in fear, not to repeat cycles of failure, but to embody purpose with boldness and clarity. The hour will not wait for your comfort. It will only wait for your agreement, and the moment you renounce powerlessness, heaven rushes in, not because your circumstances change instantly, but because you do. You become one who remembers, one who knows, one who refuses to bow to anything less than God's voice. So let me leave you with this. You do not need more time. You need less agreement with what is not true. Tear up the contract with fear. Refuse to rent space to defeat. This is your hour, not because the pain is gone, but because the lie can no longer rule. You are not powerless. You never were. There are moments when the resistance around you feels immovable. You've knocked, prayed, fasted, waited. Doors remained closed, people turned away, opportunities passed, and somewhere deep within, you began to internalize the idea that perhaps closed things stay closed. That perhaps this is just how it will be for you. But now everything shifts, because when God says open now, He is not merely addressing your heart, He is addressing the environment around you. Heaven's authority is being reasserted, and every form of earthly resistance must now yield. Not negotiate, not delay, yield. We forget sometimes that the natural realm is subordinate to the spiritual. What looks permanent to us is, from heaven's view, temporary and fragile. Systems, barriers, judgments, rejections, they all bow when the voice of God speaks. His authority is not philosophical, it is active. It doesn't merely observe, it interrupts. And when God says this is your hour, He is not hoping things will change for you. He is commanding that they must. The difficulty is that we often overestimate the power of what's against us and underestimate the authority of what's within us. We become like the children of Israel, standing on the edge of the promised land, paralyzed not by physical giants, but by internal fear. The giants were real, yes, but they were never greater than the word God had spoken. The tragedy wasn't the presence of resistance, it was the absence of faith, and that same dynamic lives in us. When we see doors sealed, when we feel excluded or unseen, when we hit walls, we begin to think the resistance is greater than the word. But resistance doesn't nullify God's voice. It proves its necessity. You see, the authority of God does not require the cooperation of man. When He declares a door open, it must open, even if those standing in front of it still say no. Pharaoh said no, but the sea parted. The religious system said no, but Lazarus rose. Rome said no, but the tomb was empty. History is filled with the voices of opposition, but they have never had the final word. God's command overrides resistance not by bypassing it, but by breaking its power. The truth is, many of the doors that wouldn't open before weren't because you were unworthy. They were being preserved, not withheld as punishment, but protected by providence. The timing was not a denial, it was a safeguard. Because, if you had entered too early, the door might have led you to ruin instead of purpose. But now, something has shifted. God's voice has gone out over your life, and what was once sealed must respond. This is where the philosophical tension lies. We like the idea of God being in control, until His control disrupts our explanations. We prefer narratives that make sense. I didn't get the job because I wasn't qualified. I wasn't chosen because I'm not charismatic enough. That door closed because I messed up. But God is not bound by your resume or reputation. He is not limited to human metrics. His authority is not merit-based, it is love-based. And love often opens what performance cannot. So if you're waiting for the approval of man to validate what heaven has already decreed, you'll be waiting forever. Some people will never affirm you. Some systems will never open to you by natural means. And that's precisely why God bypasses them when he speaks open. It is not a request. It is a decree that makes a mockery of resistance. It is a verdict handed down from the highest court, and no lower court can overturn it. You must understand this if you are to walk in your hour. The doors are not opening because you finally convince the world to like you. They are opening because the King has issued a command, and now you must walk through, unapologetically, decisively, and with reverent confidence. Not arrogance, not entitlement, but the calm inner knowing that comes from hearing the voice of God and choosing to agree with it, even when others do not. There is nothing passive about your hour. It is not something you wait to feel. It is something you respond to, even when the ground is still shifting under your feet. And as you move forward, the resistance you once feared will begin to collapse, not always instantly, but inevitably, not because you forced it, but because you obeyed. And obedience is the key that turns every lock God has commanded to open. So I leave you with this: stop asking the door for permission. It does not have the authority to deny what heaven has already declared. When God says open, every barrier becomes temporary. Every obstacle becomes a servant of the will of God, and every closed thing begins to tremble. There's something sacred and necessary about knowing when a season has ended, not just externally, but internally. For some of you listening now, the greatest barrier to opening is not the resistance around you, but the identity you've built through surviving. You've spent years enduring, coping, managing, adapting. And you did it well. You learned how to carry pain with dignity, how to navigate chaos with grace, how to persist when the odds were stacked against you. But here is the truth, and it may sting. The identity that helped you survive will suffocate you in your hour of emergence. There is a profound difference between surviving and living. Surviving teaches you to stay small, to avoid risk, to be constantly on guard. It keeps you focused on threats, scanning for danger, anticipating rejection before it comes. It teaches you to shrink, not out of fear but out of habit, and over time you begin to believe that this is wisdom, that caution is character, that withdrawal is discernment. But in reality, what began as a survival instinct has quietly hardened into a worldview. And this world, you cannot go with you into your hour. It cannot come through the door God is commanding you to walk through, because to open, to truly open, you must leave behind the false safety of being unseen. The survivor in you may say, "Don't stand out, don't get too hopeful, don't believe too deeply." But God is saying the opposite: be seen, be bold, be willing to be disappointed again if it means obeying me now. This is not about forgetting your pain. It's about refusing to be defined by it. You are not what happened to you. You are not what you had to do to endure. The skills you developed in survival mode were necessary then, but they become chains now. The guardedness, the suspicion, the reluctance to hope, all of these were reasonable responses in a time of danger. But when God says, "This is your hour," He is also saying, "You're not in danger anymore." This kind of transformation is not merely emotional, it is ontological. It's about the very nature of who you believe you are. If you still see yourself as someone merely trying to make it, you will sabotage every opportunity to rise. You'll mislabel expansion as threat. You'll reject honor because it feels unfamiliar. You'll mistake divine promotion for exposure. But when you embrace that your identity is no longer that of a survivor, everything shifts. You no longer brace for pain, you prepare for purpose. You no longer cling to safety. You walk toward destiny, and here's something important to recognize. People may try to keep you in your old identity because that's the version of you they're most comfortable with. Some knew you when you were small, scared, apologetic, and your growth unsettles them. Your opening threatens their categories, but do not shrink to keep others comfortable. Do not dim your light to avoid being misunderstood. God is not calling you into this hour for their approval. He's calling you for His glory, and that calling cannot be delayed to protect someone else's comfort zone. Psychologically, the leap from survivor to visionary is one of the hardest transitions a soul can make. Survivors calculate risk. Visionaries move with faith. Survivors seek stability. Visionaries accept uncertainty as the path to greatness. This isn't about throwing caution to the wind, it's about realizing that caution, when left unchecked, becomes a cage. You are not stepping into recklessness. You are stepping into a reality that your old self could not fathom. The shell has done its job. It held you together. It protected the tender parts of you, but now it is breaking, not because you are being undone, but because you are being reborn. That which protected you in the past will confine you in the future, and it takes a holy kind of courage to say, I honor who I was, but I refuse to stay there. I release the identity of the survivor so I can become the leader, the voice, the light, the answer God intended me to be. This hour is not about preservation, it is about revelation. The true you, beyond the wounds, beyond the coping, beyond the silence, is being summoned forward, and when heaven calls, nothing in hell can hold you back, unless you choose to hold on to what God is trying to remove. So I leave you with this: you were never meant to live inside the shell that saved you. Honor it, thank it, but do not cling to it. God is calling you not to survive, but to emerge. And the world is not waiting on your perfection. It is waiting on your obedience. There is a reason why your obedience in this hour matters so deeply. When God commands you to open now, it is not solely for your benefit. Yes, your healing matters. Yes, your purpose is sacred, but the truth, one we often overlook, is that your opening is not just personal, it is catalytic. There are lives on the other side of your obedience. People are watching you, even if they never say it aloud. Some are waiting silently to see what courage looks like when lived out. And your decision to rise, to answer the call, to move when it would be easier to hide, that becomes the key that unlocks something in them. We tend to underestimate the weight of our lives. We convince ourselves that our choices are isolated, that our private obedience or disobedience is inconsequential, but in reality, your yes to God becomes a door for others. Your courage to break silence gives someone else permission to find their voice. Your vulnerability, your authenticity, your willingness to open despite past wounds, it teaches others that it can be done. And more than that, it teaches them that they can do it. This is the paradox of spiritual influence. You are not responsible for saving anyone, that is God's work, but you are responsible for releasing what He has placed within you. And when you do, the ripple effect begins. A chain reaction of faith is ignited. One person daring to hope again because they saw you hope. One soul beginning to heal because you let your own healing show. One weary heart deciding to believe because your life made the invisible God visible. This is why the enemy fights so hard to keep you closed. He knows that if you rise, others will too. He knows your voice carries something. He knows that once you open, you won't be the only one who walks free. He's not merely afraid of your success. He's afraid of your influence. He wants you hidden because you were never meant to be a singular light. You were meant to be a spark that starts a wildfire. We live in a culture that idolizes individual success, as though purpose were something we possess only for ourselves. But purpose is always communal. Even in Scripture, when God calls someone, he does so with others in mind. When Moses opens to his call, a nation is set free. When Esther opens to her purpose, a people are saved. When Paul opens to the truth, churches are born. God does not hand out destinies in isolation. He plants them where they will have the greatest impact, at the intersection of personal obedience and collective transformation. This is not to say the path will be easy. In fact, the most significant breakthroughs often come with resistance, loneliness, misunderstanding. But understand this, the cost of staying closed is not just your own delay. It is also the delay of those connected to your breakthrough. The people assigned to your voice, your leadership, your light. What happens to them if you never rise? You may feel small, but your obedience carries weight. The moment you say yes, something shifts in the atmosphere. Not because you are perfect, but because you are available, and availability to God is always more powerful than ability alone. He doesn't need you to be flawless. He needs you to be open, and this is the deeper meaning of this is your hour. Not that you've finally arrived at some personal pinnacle, but that the time has come for your life to serve something bigger than your comfort, something holy, something eternal. The hour is not about your visibility, it is about your impact. And that impact, though you may never see the full scope of it, will echo beyond your lifetime. So, do not underestimate the power of your opening. Someone's faith is tied to your faithfulness. Someone's freedom is waiting on your yes. Someone's hope is anchored to your obedience. And in the divine mystery of how God moves, your hour might just be the beginning of theirs. So I leave you with this. You don't have to change the whole world. Just don't hide the part of it you were born to light up. When you open, others will follow. When you rise, others will awaken. When you walk through the door, you become the door. Let your obedience become the invitation.